All right, today's video is going to be about fixing this Husqvarna leaf blower. I've had this leaf blower for about 7 years. It's having some running issues due to most likely the carburetor, which we will be replacing today. Now, I made a previous video on my trimmer, my Husqvarna trimmer that was having some running issues. That was solved by replacing the carburetor. Kind of covered some of the issues that two-stroke engines have and how most of the time they can be solved with a carburetor replacement. I didn't show how to replace the carburetor on that trimmer due to it was a very easy carburetor swap to do. The leaf blower is there's a little more work to it, and I have taken this apart before, so I'm going to take this apart. We're going to replace the carburetor, put fuel in it, start it up, make sure it works. I'm also going to cover the particular carburetor I'm using in this video as well. So let's get to it. All right, so the first thing, you don't have to necessarily do this in order I'm doing it in, but the first thing I'm going to do is remove the pull start assembly, which is done with torque screws. I will tell y'all the size. Yep, so that is a T25 Torx. For here, you got 4 we're going to take out. And by the way, now y'all know if y'all need to replace the pull start assembly, how to do it. It's very easy to do. Keep these bolts to the side because they are different than the ones in the plastic housing. I will show y'all the difference, but just lay these 4 aside. These are actually screwed in to the block of the motor. A little tight. I thought I put them on there a little. Yeah, let's flip this guy down here. So that's the 4, and then boom, that pops off, and this is what it looks like, by the way, if you're curious. So now that that's off, I'm going to take the plastic housing off, but before I do that, let me go over the carburetor I plan on using. So this is the brand. Of course, I'll have the link in the description if everything works out. So honesty is very important to me. This company had actually reached out to me in a different video and asked if I would be willing to test their product out. I said sure. Of course, I'm going to be honest about it, if it works or not. So they did send me this this carburetor, which comes. This is the carburetor. We'll be comparing it to the one that's on there. It also comes with the gaskets, which we'll also be making sure they fit properly. They seem like decent gaskets. They're plenty thick enough. And it also came with a few extra stuff. Came with a spark plug. My spark plug's fine. I've replaced it before. It came with a new air filter. And it also comes with this. So this is the fuel line kit. And it's one piece. So you got the grommet that goes into the fuel tank, and the filter, and of course your plunger, which I think mine's fine on mine, but we may go ahead and replace this just so y'all can see how it's done. They do sell the carburetor, I think, by itself. I believe it's about $18. I think with all this it's about $23. Of course, price changes all the time on stuff on Amazon, but you know, not much more money at all to get all that stuff. So let's just lay that to the side for now, and we're going to take the housing off. which, hey, it's the same size, T25. Now, these are different, like I said. Like, if you compare the difference, like the ones that go in the block versus the ones that go, if we get any focus here. But there's a difference. One is just, you know, machine versus one that's coarse. Coarse versus fine, but just don't, you know, mix them up and screw them into the wrong hole. So once we get this casing off, and boom, there's our casing. This is our thing that holds the throttle open. You don't want to keep it open. And all it is a little plastic thing that moves back and forth. I mean, there's nothing to it. At this point in time, this little piece will come off that covers your exhaust. This just slide. It's not actually held on by me. It's held on by that cover. This is also a good time to, let's see if we can't flip this guy around here. I drained the fuel, so it shouldn't be an issue. This is a good time to check your exhaust, your muffler. So I've already took it out, but there's a screen in here. It prevents like hot carbon deposits from coming out and landing on something and starting a fire. It's not really an issue where I live because it rains a lot, but that can get clogged up with carbon, and you can take that guy out and clean it. And this is your, you know, throttle control. Here's your little linkage to your carburetor. I'm gonna go ahead and so let's get that on there. So got your little linkage. Let's take that out the carburetor. And we did drop our little throttle cable there. So that's your little cable guy, little metal rod that slides into the carburetor. And let's take our air filter housing off. You want to try to keep things together as much as possible. So, got the air filter off. Let's compare it to one that they give, which I've replaced this before, so it's not original, but yeah, it seems perfectly fine. Everything, got the little hole, everything matches up just fine. So now the carburetor is held on by 2 bolts. See them in there. I believe they're 7mm. I'll let y'all know the size, of course. Just let me get them off first. Got my deep socket. Let's see. That's a 6. Actually, let's see. Maybe it's an 8. I'll use my 8mm snap-on socket there. And that's out of the way. So this is your first gasket, which I'm gonna get this guy off, and then of course we'll compare the gaskets, because it is important that these line up. And so I'm gonna keep those to the side. And carburetor should just pull right on off. Studs, which it did. And this is your other gasket. It's kind of oily from fuel. Pretty thin gaskets. So let's compare the gaskets that it comes with. I can tell they're a little bit different. So, original gasket. Not exactly the same. But that is okay. The original ones are okay. This is pretty common in aftermarket parts, due to they generally fit a wider range of leaf blowers in a singular model. So let's get the carburetor replaced. All right, so you got your little plunger guy who just, I've never actually took this one out before. Yeah, it just clips out. So we'll compare that. Which, yeah, it does look the same. And let's go pay attention to where our fuel lines go. So your short fuel line from your plunger goes to your carburetor, and the long fuel line goes into the tank. And these fuel lines, they are on there. So I'm gonna wiggle these fuel lines off. Let me pause this for a second. All right, guys, I got the fuel line assembly out there. Let me give y'all a tip. Take the gas cap off first. You know, I had dumped the fuel out. There was a little bit of pressure in there. Had a little fuel squirt out of the line on me. So take that cap off to relieve that pressure. So here's our old assembly. Now, I have replaced this fuel filter before with an aftermarket one, so I can't compare the one that it came with, but it did come with, here's the fuel filter, plunger, cap, seal, and this is our new assembly. It does look correct to me. Fuel filter size is fine. Plunger looks fine, maybe a little more shallow, but links do look correct. which is obviously pretty darn important. Plunger links look correct. So we're going to take our fuel filter, run that down the hole, and gonna try to push that guy in. So I'm gonna work that in with a screwdriver. All right, guys, I just worked her down in there with a small little screwdriver. It's a tight fit, but that's what you want. It is a grommet. It's meant to compress, and obviously, if it's not tight, you're gonna have fuel leaking out and stuff like that. You can rotate it a little bit once it's in there, which you may have to do because you got your short fuel line. You have your short fuel line that comes out here. This is going to go to the carburetor, just as this one's going to go to the carburetor. And once you put the carburetor on there, it'll be pretty self-explanatory what side goes to what. But of course, I'm going to cover that since this is a longer video. So I got my old gaskets. I'm going to compare right quick if I want to use one of the new ones or not. I know this side is the one that went to the carburetor. So I'm just comparing the old ones. And I've decided I think I'm going to use the old gaskets. This is, like I said, pretty common aftermarket stuff. I did an aftermarket carburetor on my generator earlier this year. Same issue. It's the gasket seems not to always match up. So that's one negative to the part, but you know, carburetor could still be great, and it's all going to be just fine. So I'm really not going to hold that against them because I've seen this so many times. So these little studs, they move. They're not really screwed into anything. So just put your old nice. So I'm gonna take a carburetor. Oh, we should compare them, shouldn't we? Old carburetor. Now Husqvarna doesn't make the carburetors. It's actually made in China, just like the aftermarket part is. The brand is a ZAMA, really popular carburetor maker. Camera's not really focusing, it's too sunny out here today, but they seem to match up just fine. So the new one is on the right, my right hand, right here. This is the old one. They look fine. Let's close the flaps, they look the same. There's a few differences in like the machining holes and drilling, but once again, that really shouldn't be an issue. Pretty common in aftermarket parts. The fuel lines look the same. Weight-wise, they feel very, very similar. Throttle tension feels pretty similar. So let's go ahead and slide this carburetor on. Actually, it may be a good idea to go ahead and put the fuel lines on, especially this one on the inner side. So I'm going to slide that guy on. Fuel lines are on. It's self-explanatory. You can't put the wrong lines on the wrong side. If you did, I don't know, you're some type of miracle worker. Your short line from your tank goes on the right hand side of the carburetor if you're facing it, and then your long line coming from your plunger goes on the left side of the carburetor, which is on the upper left up here versus lower. So I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Your plunger just clips in. I'll show you the old one. It just has clips on the back, and it snaps right in. Very easy. Now I'm going to take our other gasket, because you have gasket on both sides. You have a gasket that's on the carburetor to the engine, and then there's a gasket that goes on the carburetor to the air filter housing, which I'm actually going to compare here. I think I'm going to use the old gasket here as well. The hole is just a tidbit larger. I actually like the gasket material they use. It's a good quality material. It's not sized necessarily perfectly for the application. Now that we have that on, we can go ahead and put our airbox assembly. Now we're going to have to put your little make sure your fuel lines are out of the way when you put this on. And just press it on there, and then what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and tighten this guy down, and this will compress everything together, and just basically hand tighten it down and just a little snug. I mean, this is not something you should be cranking on that tight. I got my hand all the way up on a wrench, so I'm not applying too much torque, and I'm just feeling until it feels snug. And that's plenty tight. It's probably more than tight. Let's get our throttle cable back on. I've always hated putting throttle cables back on. This one's actually really not that bad to do. It's pretty much impossible to put on wrong, but still, I don't like it. So, yep, works just fine. Let's see if I can't. Yep. And I get this fuel line out of the way. It's going to keep getting bumped. I'll press it right there. So just find a place for that fuel line. Try to get all that. See if I can't snug it up under. There we go. It wants to keep pulling back there. It'll be fine. All right. So let's get the housing and all that stuff back on. So basically just reverse the removal. I know a lot of videos don't show that. Oh yeah, this is fine. I know a lot of videos don't always show putting stuff there. It's like, hey, reverse, put it, do the reverse, but I'm gonna put it back together So y'all can just skip ahead if y'all want. That's perfectly cool. But we're gonna go ahead and put this back together. So obviously the housing should go on first. And don't forget, we have our exhaust cover, which I may put that action first. Like I said, it's not held by anything. It's actually held by the cover itself. There we go. It's got little clips. Doesn't work with plastic, so fun. All right. Oh, let's see how everything works. So make sure before we put it together, make sure everything works. Like a little handle guy. See, watch this. See how it brings that throttle in? That's, so you don't have to hold it down. Of course, y'all know what it's for, but make sure that works. And it does. So everything's put together right. Take our screws, make sure we're using the right ones. Coarse thread, not fine thread. The coarse thread is for the plastic. Fine thread is for the engine block, which is for our pull starter. So we are almost done, guys. I know it's a longer video, but I felt like I did the trimmer. I really should have done a complete install, and I didn't. So I wanted to make sure I did a complete install, real world speed, not rushing, no power tools, just doing it like you would do it yourself with a beer in your hand or something. Let's put our trimmer back on. Our pull start really is easy to replace, which is nice in case it ever breaks. No excuses if you ever find to throw it away if your pull start breaks. So easy to replace. I bought this trimmer in, I think, April or May of 2015. It's March of 2022. It gets used quite a bit. And with the price of everything going up, it just makes sense to, fix things instead of replacing them. And everything is popping together nicely, tightening up nicely. And then do a nice, crisscross pattern, make sure everything is snug. And it is. And you know what? Hey, new air filter. Let's put that on there. Oh yeah, looks good. Okay. New air filter. Air filter housing. All right, so got fuel. I typically use like a 40-to-1 ratio. I think it's recommended 50-to-1. I run a little higher. I also use 93 octane. They really do benefit from premium fuel. This is, put our cap in. And we're gonna plunge this fuel plunger at least 10 times. One, 2, 3, 4. That's 10. It's full. I'm gonna do 5 more just because it's brand new. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Choke is on. Started on choke. Previous carburetor, I could always get it started running. It would just die out the warmer it got. And eventually, once it got to full operating temperature, it was just useless, bogging down like crazy. I could tell it was starving for fuel. I find a lot of times these aftermarket carburetors actually run a little bit richer, which is not a bad thing. That's a good sign. Let's go to half choke. Well, she runs. And she's smoking a little bit. This tells me she's getting plenty of fuel. She's running a little rich, which is normal with these aftermarket carbs, and I'm okay with that. They run better that way. I've never had an issue with spark plugs fouling out. I'm gonna go use this around my yard for 5 minutes at least. I'll make sure it works, and then we're just gonna recap everything in this video real quick and give my final thought of this replacement carburetor. So hang tight. Well, she works great. I used it, blew off the driveway, ran great. Instant throttle response, doesn't bog down at all. I'm getting some smoke, which is fine with me. This isn't a low smoke oil mixture anyway. Before I couldn't get smoke at all because it was running so darn lean, and it was basically getting too hot. That's why it wouldn't run properly. Now it runs great. I have a spare spark plug that comes with, which I'll keep on handy. My spark plug in there currently is fine, but comes with one. So my final thoughts on this brand carburetor, which I will have the link in the description of the video to this part, because it did work very well and it is priced very affordably. Like I said, about $23 for this total kit. I think it's around $18 or so just for the carburetor alone. If you need an air filter replacement, or if you need to go ahead and replace your plunger because you're worried that your fuel line is going to be damaged, I say it's worth it. Go ahead and get the $23 kit. If you just need the carburetor, yes, you know for a fact that's all you need. You already have it taken apart. Then you can get the carburetor for 18 bucks. Overall, I'm happy with it. Everything fit well. Like I said, the gaskets were a little off. That doesn't really bother me a bit because I've replaced several carburetors. In my experience, aftermarket carburetors generally, the gaskets never match the OEM gaskets. If you were to compare this price-wise, I believe the OEM carburetor is at least $10 more expensive, if not $15 more expensive, just for the current carburetor. If you were to replace, I believe, the fuel line and the carburetor with OEM compared to this, you're probably going to save here at least 10, maybe 12, 15 bucks, depending. Prices do move around. The aftermarket part is made in China, but the OEM part is also made in China. These companies don't make their own carburetors anyway, so feel free to put an aftermarket part on there. Works just fine, save you some money, and you can get a new air filter, plunger, all that stuff all at one time too, which is nice. So I do recommend the part, and I hope this video helps somebody. I do apologize for it. It is a longer video. I typically don't do videos this long. I just wanted to give y'all a full, normal, take this thing apart, put it back together, make sure it runs with no, skipping steps on how to do things, and actually a real world example of how to fix one of these. So I hope this helps y'all, and until next time, I hope y'all have a great day.